You know the moment before it happens. The meeting gets tense. Your manager starts talking about what went wrong. Nobody says your name yet, but the air starts moving toward you. The people who were actually involved go very still. The person who delayed the approval looks down at their laptop. The person who gave you bad information says nothing. The person who changed the deadline without telling you suddenly has nothing to add. And before the facts are even reviewed, before anyone has walked through the actual sequence of events, everyone in the room has already understood where the blame is supposed to land. Not because you are the most responsible, because you are the most available. If every team failure somehow ends up attached to your name, you are not having a long, unlucky streak. You have been placed into a role the office needs filled. Once an office decides that your name belongs on the failure report, innocence stops protecting you. Hard work stops protecting you. Explanations stop protecting you. Because office scapegoating does not run on truth, it runs on convenience. Most people in this position make the same mistake. They believe that if they just work harder, stay later, fix more problems, and keep proving their value, the office will eventually see they are not the problem. That belief is the trap. The harder you work to clear your name, the more useful you become as the person who carries the failure of the entire system. Your cleanup becomes the evidence they use to pretend the mess was yours. Your presence at every fire scene starts to look like arson. You do not escape scapegoating by proving you are good. You escape by making it impossible to blame you casually. This video is going to walk you through 11 specific behaviors that flip the role. By the end, you should understand why you keep getting blamed, what part you have been forced to play in this organization, how to stop feeding the pattern, and how to become difficult to isolate and hard to distort. Before the 11, you need to recognize the pattern operating in your day-to-day work. Office scapegoating is structural, and it hides in the routine language of the workplace. You are blamed for delays caused by other departments. You are blamed for unclear instructions you were never given. You are blamed for problems that existed in the project before you ever touched it. Your mistakes get described as patterns. Other people's mistakes are treated as isolated incidents, one-off events, things that just happen. You are expected to fix emergencies and then criticized for how you fix them. A manager throws vague verbal directions at you on Tuesday and behaves on Friday as if the expectation was obvious from the start. Coworkers dump tasks on you and back away the moment those tasks become messy. Meetings happen without you. Decisions made in those meetings become your responsibility. You are asked to own problems with no authority, no budget, no staffing, no access, and no decision-making power. When the project succeeds, the credit gets distributed across the team. When it fails, the blame becomes very specific. That is how you know this is not ordinary accountability. Ordinary accountability follows the work. Scapegoating follows convenience. It moves toward the person least protected, not the person most responsible. The anatomy of the office scapegoat breaks into 4 ingredients. First, a broken process, something disorganized, under-resourced, badly managed, politically compromised, or structurally unstable. Second, a blame vacuum, where nobody with power wants the failure attached to their name. Third, a believable target, someone close enough to the work that blame sounds plausible to people who never saw the full timeline. Fourth, a target who has been trained to defend themselves in the worst possible way. They explain from panic. They apologize too early. They accept vague accountability because they do not want to seem difficult. They keep records in their own memory instead of in writing. They trust private fairness in a room that only respects public proof. Your goal is not to be liked more. Being liked does not protect you. Likable people get sacrificed all the time. The goal is to stop being the person whose name can be attached to mess without resistance. 1. Stop accepting vague responsibility. The trap usually starts with flattery. You are the best person for this. You know all the moving pieces. We trust you to keep it on track. That sounds like respect until the project fails and you realize they gave you ownership of the risk, not authority over the outcome. Office scapegoating thrives on vague language. Listen to the phrases that get used in your meetings. Can you own this? Just handle it. Make sure this does not fall through the cracks. We need you to take accountability here. You were involved, so this falls on you. These sentences feel harmless when you hear them. They become weapons when something fails. If the role was never defined, if the deadline was never agreed, if the decision authority was never named, if the resources were never confirmed, and if the dependencies on other teams were never written down, when the project breaks, you become responsible for everything that happened around it. Vague responsibility is a contract written in pencil that gets rewritten in blame. Before you accept any task that has political weight, you ask specific questions. What part exactly am I responsible for? What is the deadline? Who owns the final decision? Who needs to provide input before I can proceed? What resources are available? What happens if another team does not respond on time? Who gives final approval? Never accept emotional ownership of a problem without operational authority over the solution. If the office wants accountability for the outcome, the office has to give you control over the inputs. Burden without authority is not responsibility. It is a setup wearing the costume of trust. The weak version of this conversation sounds like, okay, I will handle it. The stronger version sounds like, I can take responsibility for the reporting section. For the final numbers, I will need finance to provide updated figures by Thursday. If those figures are delayed, the report timeline moves with them. That is precision, and precision is the first thing scapegoating cannot easily work around. 2. Move verbal instructions into writing. A verbal workplace can rewrite history. A written workplace has to negotiate with evidence. Your manager tells you something on Tuesday, changes their mind on Wednesday inside their own head, and behaves on Friday as if the expectation was obvious from the beginning. You look careless. The actual problem was an undocumented change of direction. You cannot prove what was said. They cannot be held to what they decided in private. After meetings, you send a short message, just confirming my understanding from today. I will focus on X. Sarah will handle Y. Final approval comes from you by Friday. Please flag if any of this is incorrect. That sentence does not sound aggressive. It does not accuse anyone of anything. It creates a record. The point is not to sound like you are building a court case every time someone asks you to do something. That makes people defensive and changes how they treat you. The point is to sound organized. Organized people create records. Panicked people create essays. A short, factual confirmation email after a meeting is exactly what an organized professional does. It costs you 3 minutes. It has protected jobs. You document the instructions, the deadlines, the changes in scope, the missing information you flagged, the approvals that were delayed, the dependencies you were waiting on, and the warnings you gave before the problem happened. The tone of every documentation message stays factual, short, and professional. No emotional essays, no accusations, no dramatic phrasing, just the record. Boring documentation outlasts dramatic memory. 3. Stop rescuing broken systems without naming the breakage. Many scapegoats arrive at the role through competence. They stay late. They fix errors. They smooth over bad planning. They save projects at the last minute. At first, this makes them look valuable. Over time, it makes them look responsible for the dysfunction. Because the organization stops seeing the dysfunction. They only see one person standing next to the mess, reliably, every single time. The office learns the wrong lesson. Not that the process is broken, that you will absorb the breakage. Then your rescue becomes invisible. The project survives. Leadership exhales. Nobody documents that the only reason it worked was because you worked through the weekend covering for 3 people who did not deliver. 6 months later, the same system fails again, and someone in the meeting says, "Why did you not prevent this?" Because the rescue was forgotten. But the failure has your name on it. There is a difference between helping and silently absorbing. Helping means contributing to the solution while still naming the source of the problem. Absorbing means making the mess disappear so everyone in power can pretend the process worked perfectly the whole time. Stop saying, "Do not worry, I will sort it out." Start saying, "I can help stabilize this, but the delay came from missing approvals and late input. I will document the blockers so we can prevent this from repeating." That sentence does 2 things. It helps the project and it does not hide the cause. If you clean up the crime scene without documenting the crime, do not be shocked when they call you the criminal. 4. Separate facts from feelings in every conflict. Scapegoated employees get pushed into emotional defense. You get accused, you feel shocked, You over-explain, your tone changes, your face changes, you say more than you intended. Then the workplace pivots. The conversation stops being about whether you were responsible. The conversation becomes about how you reacted. You got defensive. You seemed difficult. You do not take feedback well. You got emotional in the meeting. Now the scapegoating has moved past the project and into your character. Your reaction has become the evidence. The original question, were you actually responsible, has been replaced by a different question. Why does this person have such trouble accepting criticism? This is difficult because the accusation is not only professional, it feels personal. Your body wants to defend your name. Your voice wants to explain everything at once. But in that room, your name is protected by the sequence of events, not by your emotional sincerity. The defense is a cold, factual structure. The weak version sounds like, "That is unfair. I worked so hard on this and nobody helped me." The stronger version sounds like, "Let us walk through the timeline. The request came in Monday at 4:30 p.m. The data was received Wednesday at noon. I submitted the draft Thursday morning. The final delay happened after approval was pending." Defend the timeline first, before you defend your character. Character defense sounds emotional. Timeline reconstruction sounds controlled and credible. Phrases to keep ready. Let us walk through the sequence. I want to clarify the timeline. Here is what was requested, what was delivered, and what was still pending. My understanding was based on the written instruction from Tuesday. That does not match the record I have. These phrases pull the room back from vibes, tone, attitude, and personality and back to what actually happened. 5. Stop apologizing before responsibility is clear. Scapegoats apologize too early because they want to reduce the tension in the room. "Sorry about that. My bad. I should have checked on that. I will do better next time." Even when they are not fully responsible, even when the situation is genuinely unclear, even when they are already the person who flagged the problem days ago. In a political workplace, premature apologies become evidence. The apology gets stripped of its context and reused in the next conversation. Even they admitted it was their fault. They apologized in front of the whole team. In a healthy workplace, an apology smooths a relationship. In a political workplace, an apology is a confession that gets filed. Drop the reflex. You can be professional without self-incriminating. Instead of, "Sorry, I missed that," say, "I see the issue. Let me review where the breakdown happened." Instead of, "Sorry for the delay," say, "The delay appears connected to the pending approval. I will confirm the timeline." Instead of, "That was my fault," say, "I will take responsibility for my part. Let us clarify which part was mine." Do not confess to the whole fire because you touched one match. You apologize for what is yours, not for the entire project, not for another department's silence, not for a manager's unclear direction, not for impossible timelines, not for inherited problems, not for the emotional pressure in the room. 6. Make dependencies visible before the deadline. Scapegoats are often blamed because they wait until the end to reveal that other people did not deliver. Then the workplace asks, "Why did you not escalate earlier?" Even when everyone already knew about the blocker, even when you mentioned it verbally, even when it was obvious. The scenario plays out the same way every time. Finance has not sent the numbers. You know they have not sent them. Your manager probably knows they have not sent them, but you wait because you do not want to seem like you are throwing colleagues under the bus. You do not want to be seen as the person who complains. You hope it will come through. On Friday afternoon, it does not come through. The deadline passes, and now you are the person who did not deliver. If finance has not sent the numbers by Wednesday, you do not wait until Friday and hope. You send the update Wednesday afternoon. Draft is complete. Final numbers still pending from finance. If not received by Thursday noon, final delivery may move. Now the delay has an address before the blame starts looking for one. If the blocker is invisible, the blame becomes visible on you. Make dependencies visible early, in writing, repeatedly, in the language of status updates. Current status, draft complete, waiting on finance numbers. Risk, if legal feedback does not arrive by Wednesday, final submission may move. Blocked by, pending approval from operations. Needed to proceed, final client data. These categories are not bureaucracy, they are protection. They turn invisible blockers into visible records, and they make it significantly harder to blame the one person who was actually naming the risk before it exploded. 7. Build witnesses, not just friends. After the meeting, your coworker catches you in the hallway. I know that was not your fault. They always do this. You have heard it before. It feels like validation. It is not protection. Private sympathy feels comforting until the official meeting starts and everyone suddenly develops memory loss. You need witnesses, not just people who like you, people who have seen the work, received the updates, been copied on the thread, attended the meeting, or can confirm in writing what was agreed. The coworker who validates you in the break room may not protect you in the meeting, not because they are deliberately dishonest, because when their own name is not on the line, most people choose the easier path, staying out of it, not remembering clearly, not being sure what they saw. If the truth only exists in private conversations, it will not protect you in a public accusation. You build witnesses by copying relevant stakeholders on factual updates after decisions are made, by summarizing group meeting outcomes in a short follow-up message, by asking clarifying questions in shared channels rather than in private DMs, by refusing to accept responsibility for multi-person work inside private one-on-one conversations where there is no record, by avoiding politically risky work in complete isolation. None of this requires aggressive behavior or unnecessary drama. The aim is making sure reality has more than one observer. A scapegoat is easiest to corner when the story becomes one person's word against someone with more institutional power. You do not let the story take that shape. 8. Refuse the helper trap. Someone tells you, "You are so good at fixing this kind of thing." It feels like recognition. You say yes. 3 weeks later, the broken task is officially yours and the person who said it has moved on to something else. That is how exploitation disguises itself as trust. The office scapegoat is often the helper, the yes person, the one who stays late, the one who covers for others, the one who teaches new hires on top of their regular workload, the one who fixes errors that were never theirs to fix, the one who absorbs the emotional stress of the entire team because nobody else has the capacity or the patience. Helpers confuse being needed with being respected. Real trust comes with authority, credit, and protection. Exploitation comes with urgency, guilt, and vague appreciation. There is a difference between being helpful and being absorbent. A helpful person contributes. An absorbent person takes impact. A helpful person supports the system. An absorbent person becomes the system's pressure valve, absorbing every failure until they become the face of every breakdown. Before taking on extra work that carries political weight, you ask the real questions. Will this be recognized formally or only verbally? Will this be documented anywhere? Will this become a permanent expectation? Will I be blamed if this fails? Am I genuinely helping, or am I covering for someone else's failure and building the case against myself? Stop letting people borrow your competence and repay you with blame. Phrases that keep you cooperative without making you the dumping ground. I can help with this, but my current priority will need to be adjusted. I can take this on once we clarify ownership in writing. I can support, but I should not be listed as the owner. I can review it, but the final decision needs to stay with the project lead. Each of these sentences does the same thing. It contributes without absorbing. 9. Challenge blame in the moment, calmly and precisely. You cannot absorb accusations in silence. Silence reads as agreement. But emotional fighting gives the room new material to use against you. So you need controlled interruption. not snapping back, not performing outrage, placing a factual correction into the room before the false version hardens. The first version of the story often becomes the official version if nobody challenges it. Not because it is the most accurate, because it arrived first and sat in the room unchallenged. You are not waiting 3 days and then sending a long emotional email. By then, the framing has set. The people in that meeting have already discussed it among themselves. You correct the framing when it appears, in the room, in the meeting, in the moment. Phrases you deliver without raising your voice. I need to pause that framing. I do not agree with that characterization. That leaves out an important part of the timeline. That was not my decision point. I was responsible for the draft, not the final approval. The issue was flagged before the deadline. That conclusion does not match the documented sequence. These lines work because they do not sound panicked. They sound like someone correcting the record, the way a composed professional would. The delivery matters. You are not threatening anyone. You are not making a scene. You are placing the other version of events on the table before the room has a chance to forget it existed. 10. Change your reputation from easy to blame to expensive to blame. This is the strategic core of everything else in this video. Right now, the workplace may blame you because it costs nothing. No documentation to contradict, no witnesses to consult, no pushback to navigate, no clear boundary of what your role actually was, no timeline on record, no record of the dependencies you were waiting on, no visible allies outside your immediate manager, no indication that you have external options. The organization attaches failure to your name and pays no administrative, political, or reputational price for doing it. That is the problem, and that is what changes. To become expensive to blame, you document calmly and without accusation. You clarify ownership before work begins. You speak in timelines and sequences rather than feelings and intentions. You keep receipts. You correct false narratives in the moment, early, precisely. You stop accepting vague accountability. You make blockers visible before the deadline. You stay professionally composed under pressure. You build relationships outside your immediate manager so your reputation is not entirely dependent on one person's interpretation of you. You know your internal policies. You know when escalation becomes appropriate. You understand your employment rights in your jurisdiction. A necessary caution: do not weaponize HR casually. Do not threaten legal action casually. Do not become theatrical. Do not send emotional manifestos at midnight. Do not behave as if every disagreement is a formal dispute. The power in this approach comes entirely from being factual, consistent, composed, and difficult to corner. The moment you become dramatic, you give the office new material to work with. When the cost of blaming you becomes higher than the convenience, the office has to deal with the actual record instead of the easiest target. You do not need to become loud. You need to become hard to rewrite. That is the essence of flipping the script. Most scapegoats believe their job is to convince the office they are good. That is not the job. The job is to make it administratively, politically, and reputationally expensive to keep using you as the fall guy. Right now, the price is 0. That ends. 11. Prepare an exit before the scapegoat role becomes your identity. Some workplaces respond to records, clarity, and change behavior. Others only respond by finding a new way to punish the person who stopped being convenient. You need to know which one you are inside before the role finishes what it started. The internal corrosion is the part nobody explains clearly enough. After enough months in the scapegoat role, the voice in your head starts to change. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I really am difficult. Maybe I'm not as competent as I thought. Maybe every workplace will see me this way eventually. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity starts to feel like truth. After long enough, you begin performing the role they assigned you because the false version has had so much time to move in. The internal damage is not always visible, but it is real. Staying too long in this position costs you your confidence, your reputation inside the industry, your health, and the clarity about who you actually are as a professional. While still behaving professionally inside the building, you build an exit on the outside. You update the resume before you need to. You save allowed work samples while you still have access to them. You reconnect with old colleagues before the situation becomes urgent. You track your achievements with dates and outcomes in a document that belongs to you. You request references from people who actually know your work now while those relationships are warm. You apply discreetly. You learn your market value in the current environment. You reduce financial dependency where that is possible. You keep emotional distance from the office narrative about who you are. Do not spend 5 years trying to prove your innocence to people who benefit from your guilt. Sometimes flipping the script means staying and forcing the workplace to deal with a documented, composed, difficult to distort version of you until the dynamic changes. Sometimes it means leaving with your record intact before the role finishes what it started. Both outcomes are a form of winning. The loss is staying inside the role until it becomes your identity. Look at the picture this video has built. Office scapegoating is about convenience, not truth. The easiest person to blame is often chosen before the facts are examined. Over-explaining weakens you. When you explain from panic, the room hears guilt. When you reconstruct facts, the room hears control. Documentation is not paranoia. It is memory insurance for a workplace that will selectively forget what is inconvenient. Helping without limits makes you disposable. The office may value your dependability every day until it needs someone to punish, and then your dependability becomes the resume of your guilt. Authority without accountability is privilege. Accountability without authority is a trap. Calm correction outperforms emotional defense every time. The person who controls the timeline tends to control the narrative, and your aim is no longer to be loved by the system. Your aim is to become less convenient to falsely accuse. You cannot control whether a dysfunctional workplace wants a scapegoat. That decision was made before you walked in the door. What you control is whether you remain the easiest person to cast in that role. The old version of you absorbed confusion, accepted vague blame, rescued broken systems without naming what was broken, apologized faster than the facts arrived, and explained yourself to people who were never interested in the explanation. The new version documents, clarifies, names dependencies, corrects framing in the moment, builds witnesses, refuses absorbency, and prepares options. That is how you flip the script, not by begging the office to become fair, by making unfairness harder to execute against you. The office will keep looking for someone whose name fits the failure. Make sure that name is no longer yours.